Number 10. Softening statements. Unnecessarily. Softening statements unnecessarily begins quietly. It sounds like kindness, but it behaves like erosion. You add just maybe, I could be wrong, before a thought even leaves your mouth. Not because you doubt the idea, but because you doubt your right to take up space with it. Every softened sentence sends a subtle message to your nervous system. Danger exists here. Shrink first. Here's the trap most people never notice. Language trains posture. When you pre-apologize for existing, your body follows the script, shoulders dip, voice thins, timing hesitates. Over time, your brain stops asking, what do I think? And starts asking what will be tolerated. Confidence rarely disappears in big confrontations. It dissolves in these tiny retreats you keep labeling as politeness. Softening feels safe because it reduces friction. But friction is how reality confirms your presence. A clear statement creates a boundary. This is my perception. Accept it or challenge it. When you blur that edge, people unconsciously downgrade its weight. They interrupt more, decide for you more, trust you less, not because they're malicious, but because certainty signals stability and leadership. This isn't about becoming harsh or dominant. It's about letting sentences stand upright without leaning on excuses. Say the thought, then breathe. Let silence do the work you've been exhausting yourself trying to manage. Discomfort is not a warning sign. It's evidence you didn't abandon yourself mid-sentence. If you want your confidence back, stop cushioning your truth. Politeness that costs you clarity isn't kindness, it's self-editing. And every time you speak without shrinking, you quietly retrain the room on how to listen. Number 9. Letting others decide by default. Letting others decide by default doesn't feel like a decision. That's why it's dangerous. It hides behind silence, delayed responses, and whatever works. On the surface, you look easygoing. Underneath, something more corrosive is happening. Your agency is being outsourced without your consent. Each time you don't choose, your brain still records an outcome. It learns that action happens to you, not through you. Over time, this rewires your self-image. You stop seeing yourself as a source of direction and start seeing yourself as a variable, something to be adjusted around stronger wills. Confidence doesn't vanish because you chose wrong. It vanishes because you stopped choosing at all. There's a quiet psychological cost here. When others decide, they also frame the context, the pace, and the value system. You inherit priorities that weren't yours. Resentment slowly accumulates, but it has nowhere clean to go, because technically, you agreed. That internal conflict drains energy. You feel tired without knowing why, indecisive without lacking intelligence, invisible without being ignored. People often confuse flexibility with humility. They are not the same. Flexibility is choosing to adapt. Defaulting is avoiding the responsibility of preference. One is strength with range, the other is fear dressed as neutrality, and the world can sense the difference immediately. The cruel irony is that most people don't want to decide for you. They do it because someone has to move the situation forward. When you don't step in, you teach them that your perspective is optional. Not wrong, optional. And optional things are easy to overlook. Reclaiming confidence here doesn't require dominance. It requires friction. Say what you want before it's asked. State a preference even if it's imperfect. Let the world adjust to you sometimes. Choice is a muscle. If you don't use it, it doesn't stay neutral. It atrophies. Number 8. Avoiding disagreement to stay likable. Avoiding disagreement feels like emotional intelligence. You read the room, you sense tension before it forms. You nod, smile, redirect, and for a while it works. You're liked, included, invited, but slowly, something flips. You're present in the room, yet absent from the outcome. That's the cost no one warns you about. Here's what really happens when you dodge disagreement. Your mind learns that connection is conditional, that harmony requires silence, that honesty risks rejection. So before a thought fully forms, your brain edits it for safety. You don't just hide opinions from others, you stop finishing them internally. That's where confidence takes its first real hit. Disagreement isn't aggression, it's contrast, and contrast is how identity sharpens. Without it, your personality becomes foggy even to you. You start feeling strangely hollow in conversations, like you're watching yourself play a role instead of participating. People may call you easy to be around, but rarely grounded or strong. Likability without substance turns into social invisibility. There's another layer most people miss. When you never disagree, you also rob others of friction. You prevent ideas from being tested. Relationships stay smooth but shallow. And deep down, people sense you're withholding, not because you're kind, but because you don't trust the bond to survive honesty. That creates distance, not closeness. The fear isn't really about conflict. It's about loss. Loss of approval, loss of safety, loss of the version of yourself that's never too much. But confidence is built by surviving small ruptures and realizing you're still standing, and often still respected. Number 7. Waiting for validation before acting. Waiting for validation before acting feels responsible. It sounds mature. You tell yourself you're being careful, strategic, considerate, but underneath that logic is a quieter habit forming. You're training your confidence to require permission. Every pause becomes a question mark aimed outward instead of a signal inward. Here's the psychological shift most people don't notice. Action creates feedback. Validation replaces it. When you wait for approval, your brain never collects real-world evidence of competence. It only collects reactions. Over time, self-trust weakens because it's never exercised. You stop asking, "Does this feel right to me?" and start asking, "Will this be supported?" That's not discernment, that's dependence. The danger compounds in subtle ways. You delay starting. You second-guess momentum. You hesitate at thresholds where growth lives. And when validation finally comes, it doesn't energize you. It temporarily relieves anxiety. That relief is addictive. Soon, movement feels uncomfortable without reassurance attached. Confidence doesn't collapse loudly here. It rusts. People who wait for validation often believe confidence comes after approval. In reality, approval usually follows movement. The world responds to motion, not readiness. When you act without consensus, something crucial happens. Your nervous system learns that uncertainty is survivable. That lesson is the backbone of confidence. This isn't about ignoring feedback or becoming reckless. It's about reversing the order. Act from internal clarity first. Adjust second. Let mistakes teach you instead of opinions cage you. Validation should refine your path, not unlock it. The moment you stop asking for permission to begin, your confidence stops being a fragile feeling and starts becoming a structure, one built from proof, not praise. Number 6. Overqualifying opinions. Overqualifying opinions sounds thoughtful. You add context, disclaimers, background reasons, footnotes, before anyone even challenges you. This might not be accurate. I haven't thought it through fully. I could be missing something. It feels responsible. But what you're really doing is negotiating the value of your own perception before it's even on the table. Here's the deeper issue. When you overqualify, you signal uncertainty where there may be none. Not intellectual uncertainty, but existential uncertainty. You're telling the room that your thoughts need protection, that they can't stand alone, that they require padding to survive contact. People don't hear nuance, they hear lack of conviction. And conviction is what gives ideas gravity. Psychologically, this creates a split. You have an opinion, but you don't fully inhabit it. You hover above it, ready to retreat. Over time, your mind learns that holding a clear stance is risky, so it dilutes clarity at the source. You stop trusting your conclusions, even when they're sound. Confidence weakens not because you're wrong, but because you never let yourself be fully right. There's also an exhaustion factor. Overqualifying burns energy. You're managing reactions that haven't happened yet. You're defending against imagined criticism. That constant pre-defense keeps your nervous system in a low-level alert state. Calm confidence cannot coexist with that posture. Strong communicators aren't certain because they know everything. They're certain because they accept the cost of being challenged. They state the thought cleanly, then let dialogue do its job. If refinement is needed, it comes after, not before. You don't need fewer explanations. You need fewer apologies disguised as context. Say what you think, let it land, let it be tested. Confidence grows when your ideas are allowed to stand without crutches. You don't need to argue more. You need to disappear less. Let a no exist without explanation. Let a differing view breathe without rushing to soften it. Disagreement doesn't break connection. It reveals whether it was real to begin with. Number 5. Minimizing needs to avoid tension. Minimizing your needs starts as a strategy. You tell yourself you're being low maintenance, adaptable, understanding. You don't ask for much. You don't want to be a burden. But quietly, this habit teaches your mind a dangerous rule. My needs are negotiable, everyone else's are not. Here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Needs are signals. They tell your nervous system that you matter in the equation. When you consistently downplay them, your system stops sending clear signals at all. You begin to feel disconnected from yourself, irritated without reason, tired without cause, resentful without permission to express it. Confidence weakens because it's built on self-recognition, and you've been practicing self-erasure. Avoiding tension doesn't remove it. It internalizes it. What you don't voice doesn't disappear. It turns inward. The body carries it as tightness. The mind carries it as self-doubt. You start adapting so well that you lose track of what you were adapting from. That's when people say, "I don't even know what I want anymore." It's not confusion. It's conditioning. There's also a relational cost. When you minimize needs, you deny others the chance to meet you. You don't give them accurate information about how to care, collaborate, or respect boundaries. Over time, this creates imbalance. You give flexibility. Others give assumption. And assumption slowly replaces consideration. Confidence isn't loud demands or constant assertion. It's the quiet certainty that your internal signals are valid data. That tension isn't danger, it's information. When you state a need calmly and the world doesn't collapse, Your nervous system updates its beliefs. You don't become difficult by naming what you need. You become real. And confidence doesn't grow from being easy. It grows from being honest without disappearing. Number 4. Adjusting personality to match rooms. Adjusting your personality to match rooms feels like social intelligence. You shift tone, energy, humor, even values depending on who's present. You call it adaptability. But over time, this constant recalibration sends a quiet message inward. Who I am is negotiable, depending on who's watching. Here's the psychological cost people rarely notice. When your personality becomes situational, your identity loses a stable center. Your mind stops anchoring behavior to internal truth and starts anchoring it to external response. Confidence can't form in that environment because confidence requires continuity. You can't trust yourself if yourself keeps changing. This habit often develops from survival, not weakness. At some point, fitting in felt safer than standing out, so you learn to scan rooms instead of expressing presence. The problem is that scanning never turns off. Even alone, part of your mind is still adjusting, editing reactions, filtering impulses, suppressing instincts. That constant self-monitoring creates tension and fatigue. You feel socially active but internally empty. People may describe you as versatile or charming, but they struggle to describe you clearly. That ambiguity affects respect. Consistency signals integrity. When others don't know what version of you they'll get, they unconsciously lead instead. And when you're always adjusting, you're never grounding the space, you're orbiting it. This isn't about being rigid or socially careless, it's about carrying the same internal posture everywhere you go, letting your humor, pace, and opinions vary naturally, not strategically. When you stop managing perception, your nervous system relaxes. You feel heavier, steadier, more rooted. Confidence grows when you recognize this truth. Rooms don't define you. You define how you enter them. And the more consistently you show up, the less effort it takes to be respected. Number 3. Saying it's okay when it's not. Saying it's okay when it's not sounds peaceful. It sounds mature, forgiving, evolved. 2 simple words that smooth the moment and keep things moving. But every time you say them against your truth, your confidence takes a small, invisible hit. Not dramatic, not obvious, just cumulative. Here's what's really happening internally. Your body registers a violation before your mouth finishes the sentence. Something crossed a line. Time, respect, effort, care, and instead of marking it, you erase it verbally. The nervous system doesn't forget that. It learns that your boundaries are unreliable, even to yourself. And when boundaries blur, confidence has nothing solid to stand on. This habit often comes from wanting to be easy or understanding. But understanding without acknowledgement becomes self-betrayal. You train yourself to tolerate discomfort silently, and tolerance slowly turns into numbness. You stop trusting your emotional signals because you keep overriding them. Eventually, you don't know whether something actually hurt, or whether you're just being too sensitive. That confusion is corrosive. There's also a relational distortion here. When you say, "it's okay," you close the feedback loop. The other person receives confirmation that their behavior landed fine. No adjustment happens. No repair occurs. The imbalance repeats. And with every repeat, your unspoken resentment grows while your voice shrinks. Confidence can't grow in a system where truth is constantly canceled mid-sentence. Being honest doesn't require confrontation. It requires accuracy. That didn't feel great. I need to talk about this. I'm not okay with that. These statements don't explode situations. They clarify them. And clarity builds trust, both outward and inward. When you stop saying it's okay reflexively, something powerful shifts. You teach your system that your internal experience matters. And confidence, at its core, is just that belief practiced consistently. Number 2. Prioritizing harmony over honesty. Prioritizing harmony over honesty feels noble. You keep things smooth. You prevent discomfort. You believe peace is more important than being right. But when harmony becomes the goal at the cost of truth, confidence doesn't weaken. It quietly evacuates. Here's the hidden mechanism. Harmony achieved through suppression isn't peace. It's tension postponed. Every time you swallow a truth to keep things calm, your body absorbs the conflict instead. Your nervous system becomes the battlefield so the room doesn't have to be. Over time, this creates internal noise, restlessness, anxiety, self-doubt, because something true keeps trying to surface and keeps being pushed back down. Honesty isn't just about speaking facts. It's about allowing your inner reality to exist externally. When you block that expression, you fracture yourself. One part maintains the atmosphere. Another part carries the truth. Confidence can't form in divided territory. It requires alignment between what you feel, think, and express, even when that alignment creates friction. People who over-prioritize harmony often believe they're protecting relationships. In reality, they're protecting stability. not connection. Real connection tolerates disruption. It survives discomfort. When honesty is absent, relationships become predictable but shallow, and you start feeling lonely in rooms full of people because no one is actually meeting you. There's also a power dynamic at play. The person who sacrifices honesty becomes the emotional regulator for everyone else. You adjust so others don't have to. That's not kindness. It's overfunctioning. And overfunctioning slowly convinces you that your role is maintenance, not expression. Confidence returns when you let honesty breathe, even softly, even imperfectly. You don't need to be cruel. You need to be real. Harmony that requires your silence is not harmony, it's compliance. Number 1. Confusing kindness with self-erasure. Confusing kindness with self-erasure is one of the most socially rewarded ways to lose yourself. You're praised for being understanding, selfless, patient. You're told you have a good heart, and slowly, you start believing that disappearing is the same thing as being good. It isn't. It's just quieter. Here's the deeper damage. Kindness is a choice. Self-erasure is a reflex. When you erase yourself to keep others comfortable, your nervous system learns that safety comes from absence, from not needing, from not wanting, from not standing out. Confidence cannot survive that lesson. It requires the belief that your presence is not a problem to solve. This pattern often begins with empathy. You feel others deeply, so you make space for them. Too much space. You compress your opinions, downsize your emotions, postpone your needs indefinitely. Over time, you stop feeling generous and start feeling hollow. Burnout follows, but you can't explain it because on paper you've done nothing wrong. That's the trap. Self-erasure also distorts morality. You start measuring goodness by how little inconvenience you cause. You apologize for boundaries. You feel guilty for clarity. You mistake exhaustion for virtue. But kindness that requires you to vanish isn't kindness. It's fear wearing moral clothing. The world doesn't actually benefit from you being smaller. It benefits from you being whole, from your limits, from your preferences, from your honest reactions. When you erase yourself, you don't create more love. You create imbalance. And imbalance always costs someone eventually, usually you. Real kindness includes yourself in the equation. It doesn't demand sacrifice by default. It doesn't equate silence with goodness. When you stop disappearing to prove you're kind, something powerful happens. Your confidence stops needing permission. It becomes steady, quiet, unapologetic. That's not selfishness. That's integrity.